tennis, the U.S. Open, which is one of the four biggest tennis tournaments, starts on Monday. Most of our listeners, I assume, don't care about tennis, but it's an awesome sport, and it happens to be one that my parents both played, and I played a little bit when I was a kid. So it was the one sport that was whenever the U.S. Open, the Australian Open, the French Open, or Wimbledon, which are the four Grand Slam tournaments, were on. We would have that on the television for those week and a half, 2 weeks that they were on. And in fact, I think my parents went to at least one of the U.S. Opens, which is always, it overlaps Labor Day in, what is it? I was say Flushing Meadows, but I feel like that's a race. That's a horse race. Anyway, somewhere in New York. And Novak Djokovic, who is sort of vying along with Rafael Nadal and Roger Federer for which one of these guys is maybe the best male tennis player ever.
I don't know if that editorial permits you to.
Luckily, I'm not submitting this editorial to Nature Human Behavior.
Then do go on.
Yes, do go on. And in fact, I said male. I was like, well, I don't have to say male because we're not going to go here really, but. If they are the best male tennis player ever, then they are the best tennis player ever. And that's not to say I played tennis. I haven't played in forever, but there's been some extraordinary female tennis, women's tennis out there. But but the best male tennis player is better than the best female tennis player. Sorry, end of story, done.
For now.
Oh?
Well, if you think about it. All right, let's just hypothetically speak.
Okay, here we go.
The best male tennis player is, Larry Chimbab, in some hypothetical future situation. And suppose he becomes Nadine instead of Larry. Mm-hmm. Now he can be the best female tennis player, and he will now be able to beat the best male tennis player, whoever it was that he had initially. Well,
in your ridiculous scenario, though, I do think that although once having gone through puberty as a male, you cannot undo the benefits of that male puberty, but the act of hormonal and certainly surgical transition actually does render you somewhat less capable. So this is not an argument for anyone who's decided that they're the sex that they're not to be able to play with that sex. But it is suggestive that a top-notch male player who transitioned might not still be able to beat the other top-notch male players. And of course, it's telling that you don't have men at the top of their game transitioning. You have men who are middling and can't win transitioning and then beating all the women because that's what gross men would want to do. That's not sportsmanlike. There's nothing honorable in this, but elite male athletes don't transition.
Right. No, I agree. And my setup was of course absurd, but my real point is you are throwing out rules that open the door to every conceivable skullduggery and to the inability to say perfectly clear things. Is the world threatened by the fact that the best male tennis player is going to permanently be better than the best female tennis player for morphological reasons, among others, that nobody chose? I don't think so. But the point is, if we can't even talk about it because we are going to be forced to embrace the idea that, trans women are women, and therefore a male tennis player who transitioned to female and upended the very clear distinction between the quality of play at the top of males and female tennis, right? We're going to lose the ability to even discuss what is true, which is then going to further open the door for more madness.
Yep. Okay. So, but Djokovic is not having trouble because there's anything about trans anywhere in his life, so far as I'm concerned.
True.
Not so far as I know. I have no idea. He's a character. Before COVID, I definitely knew people back, especially. So Federer is 40, and he didn't play, I think, in Wimbledon this year because he had knee surgery or surgeries, but he's still, like, he's not retired. So, I mean, and all of these guys, I think, are in their mid-late 30s, like the other two that we're talking about, Nadal and Djokovic. And they are all awesome. And many people find, watching Federer play, he's just beautiful. And Nadal is powerful and elegant, but it's a different kind of play. And then Djokovic's personality grates on people, which shouldn't affect whether or not you love to watch him play. But there are some people who sort of, were rooting for, Federer to get the most Grand Slam titles, or Nadal. And there are presumably Djokovic devotees, but there were fewer of them because he's a little bit more of a brash personality. COVID happens, and he becomes one of them dirty, unvaccinated types. Becomes by changing nothing about what he was doing, right? By saying, no, thank you, I'm healthy, I'm good, and also, oh, by the way, I don't know if he said this, but like, oh, by the way, elite male athletes seem to be not doing so well at some level with these things, and I don't need one. Earlier this year, that meant that the Australian Open, he was already in country, I think, said, actually, you're not allowed to play. We're deporting you, or we're taking away your visa, or whatever. I think they locked him up briefly.
Yeah, they quarantined him, even though there was no evidence of his being sick.
And then they kicked him out. And this is, I think he and Nadal and Federer are all like neck and neck for the number of Grand Slam titles he'll get. And okay, that was one that he just had no access to. And now the U.S. isn't allowing him to come play in the U.S. Open, even though, finally, some of the stupid narrative around COVID vaccines is unraveling, and there are going to be unvaccinated people in the stands watching, and unvaccinated people, at least citizens, can freely come and go from the U.S., and the president of the country, who is presumably ultimately responsible for this decision, is quadruple vaxxed and has been on Paxlovid and all of the best stuff, and he's gotten COVID twice because that's how protective these insane so-called treatments are. And so what is this? Who is this protecting? So unfortunately, if what this results in is Nadal, awesome, amazing athlete that he is, ends up with the most Grand Slam titles of any man, there's forever, ever, ever an asterisk after his name. It's not his fault. It's not Djokovic's fault. It's not. Because Djokovic not taking one of these stupid treatments into his arm is not responsible for the arbitrary authoritarian decision of supposedly democratic governments.
Yeah, I think it's even worse. There is a way in which there has been a fervor to transfect people with these agents that has, to many of us, suggested a desire to do away with anyone against whom to compare the health of people who have had these treatments.
The control group is small.
Right. Mm-hmm. Eliminating the control group has been one of very few obvious explanations for the level of fervor for reaching everybody. Mm-hmm. And in this case, I hate to say this, but the people who are playing in these tournaments apparently did get transfected. And given the nature of the danger, especially of the mRNA versions of these transfection agents, it is not impossible that there would be some subclinical damage in some, or depending on the pharmacokinetics of these things, multiple. And so the question is, if you're going to prevent the pattern from being provable, again, you have to intervene somewhere else. It's rather a lot like nature, human behavior, taking up arms against the idea that something might be better than something else in the realm of humans. You don't very well want tennis players free not to take these treatments and then to see a competition, an athletic competition between people who did and people who didn't. You might be, if you had enough variation, you might actually be able to see something. And, I hate living in that world, but
it's terrible.
Given the...
But we didn't create it.
We didn't create it, and what's more, our worst fears about what was causing the conversation to go the way that it did as these things were actively being pushed. I mean, they're still being pushed, weirdly, but as they were so actively being pushed, we now know that there was an army of people hired to shape conversation online right? That these were paid shills. We suspected there were paid shills, but we now this is just a simple fact. And so in any case, I do think we have to worry about things as troubling as, are they trying to deny us the evidence that would become apparent if we were simply able to go from here and watch the world unfold the way it would and be able to compare people who made different decisions and just see what happened to them?
There shall be no comparison or investigation or testing of hypotheses that we find unsavory.
Right, exactly. And this is unsavory for a different reason. This is unsavory for, pharma capture corruption reasons. But
and just to be clear, again, this hypothesis sounds plausible by many rubrics, but proposing a hypothesis is not saying, I believe that thing is true. Proposing hypotheses is what scientists do. It's what we do. We therefore, in seeing a pattern and making an observation, it is our job to come up with all of the possible explanations for why that pattern or that observation might exist. It is our job to come up with all of them. If this hypothesis wasn't being proposed here, given that it is a possibility, that would be an indication that something is awry. Right? So every time a hypothesis is proposed and some frickin' internet rando says, aha, conspiracy theorist, that is a demonstration that that internet rando, like most people apparently, don't know what science is or how it's done.
Right. And
the proposing of a hypothesis is necessary to the doing of science.
They may not even be a rando. That's what we now know. They may be posing as a rando.
Or they might not be posing as a rando. There are a lot of people who are not randos on the internet making crazy claims about, look at all these conspiracy theorists out there, when they really ought to know better that actually proposing hypotheses is what scientists do, and shutting down conversation and shutting down the idea of what might be possible is what crazy people who want the end of democracy do.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm proud that we coined the term medically woke, because the point is we are now able to see out in broad daylight that this is just a different version of the authoritarianism with a different target, right? It's the same toolkit, right? You will not be able to say these things. If we find you even thinking them, terrible things will happen to you, so don't think them.
Yeah.
And in this case, it's a physiological topic rather than a moral one. But But in any case, I did also want to point out, though, I don't follow tennis. I have, of course, what little I've encountered it, I have certainly heard, the assertions that Djokovic is, unlikable or something along these lines. I now feel very differently about this, right? My sense is, he's disagreeable, right?
That's the word.
He's disagreeable, and he has done something important here. He's not only a historical figure in tennis, he is now actually a historical figure for taking a stand in this context where others have not. And, I do feel bad that, Nadal, for example, if he, achieves the maximum Grand Slam wins, will have the asterisk. But that is a tiny, tiny price compared to having somebody in a different milieu where we haven't seen a lot of courage on this front stand up and say, actually, I will accept the cost to my historical significance in tennis to do what I believe is the right thing here in terms of my health, right? And many more people should be making that decision.
Indeed. That's right. Are we there, or do you want to pick up one of these other topics?
No, I think we're probably there. I guess I did want to say one last thing, which is that the problem here is that now one has to have one of two views about what's going on in tennis, right? Either is it Djokovic?
Djokovic, yeah.
Either Djokovic is a troublemaker who, isn't doing his part to protect people from COVID by getting his vaccination, and he's being punished by, the powers that be because what we need is compliance, or he's a hero who is standing up to those powers in spite of the fact that it may cost him a piece of his legacy in tennis. And I would just point out that, it is odd that they have turned tennis into a team sport. Right? It's
oh, yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's a very troubling phenomenon.